Hi, Sandy Bell from Veterans Affairs. I'm just wondering, with the constituency that you described, particularly in the Victorian example, about the local governments and what was the other place you got sourced from?
Courts.
Courts, okay. With our client grouping, we have a review tribunal mechanism for primary decisions to be reviewed, and then onto AAT, Fed Court, etc. And the interesting thing, and I'm just wondering if you've got any parallel experience here, but we actually have a hard time convincing a lot of our clients to give us any new evidence at the time they make the application to the tribunal. And when we did an analysis, there's 85% of all overturned decisions were as the result of new evidence, which we could have overturned internally, but it was sort of a culture of, I want my day in court, and I'm just wondering if you've got some parallel experience there.
I think with the court referrals, because they're coming from court, I think the sort of work that we do with people is around trying to convince them, well, this is your day in court. Being in the mediation, this is the equivalent of it. We don't have so much of a problem with that as I know people often say that people ultimately want their day in court, but it hasn't. Certainly, we have more cases than we can handle, but also, I think with us, the thing is, once it's referred from the court to us, we then do an assessment. So the only bit you're being referred to really is an assessment. If you definitely don't want a mediation and you do want to go before a judicial officer, then you go. The minute you say you don't want a mediation, then we don't persevere with it. So in that sense, we're only seeing the people who want to go to mediation. Sometimes I think too it's different if you're trying to run, and it sounds to me like you're trying to run an internal system within your appeal system. When people are being referred to somebody else, they're a bit more willing to be forthcoming with information, perhaps, I'm not sure, but we don't have a problem with people wanting their day in court.
Can I just add to that, and I quite liked the Rolf Alter comment this morning about money makes a difference, because at Legal Aid we would actually insist that people actually try other options. We don't give a full grant of aid for someone to litigate or to get to court unless there are acts of violence in a family law context. But you wouldn't get a grant to go to court first up, and you'd have to have very good reason to show why, in fact, the matter did not appropriately settle at a ADR mediation, early dispute resolution hearing. So that's really fundamental to us.
Thank you very much. So just a couple of wrap-up remarks. I think, first of all, it's quite clear that there's deep experience with the whole question of citizen or client co-production in this particular domain. So that's consistent with the general observations of our keynote speakers that this is not a new concept in its most general sense for improving public management. And perhaps for that reason, there's quite a lot of experience to inspect, to analyze, and to draw some inferences that could be used in other settings qualitatively as a reference point. So there's so many questions, it suggests that this is an interesting case for that purpose. Second, it's very interesting in looking at the questions and the answers that the citizen co-production piece is just a piece. The significance of it, the role that it plays, can't really be understood unless you have a rounded picture of the whole program that you're talking about, right? And so many of the responses involve giving you information about other parts of the program than the organization-citizen interface. I think that's very important. So in a way, we're highlighting part of the practice of these organizations and their enterprises, and it's very important to do so, but the holistic perspective on these programs is extremely important. And I would also observe that this was quite a good discussion, in part because there was a lot of co-production here by virtue of good questions as well as good responses. And we might just think about that for a second. Why is it that your contribution was so essential to this particular performance? Okay? And there might be a little theory that you can take away from this. It's called the curse of knowledge. Has anybody come across the curse of knowledge? You can read about it in a wonderful book by Chip and Dan Heath called Made to Stick, about getting messages to stick. And it all is premised on the idea that we don't know how to communicate to other people because we don't know what they don't know. And they put it in a very clear psychological proposition. Once you know something and have known it for a long time, it's impossible to imagine not knowing it. And in there lies one of the challenges to communication, which through co-production we have overcome. Would you join me in thanking our panelists?